So our question is where to invest in mobility. Last week, for example, Volkswagen invested $300 million in Get. Get is a startup based in Tel Aviv, Israel, and they provide on-demand mobility service, which is more or less comparable to Uber. And my question is, why are car builders interested in startups like Get, Lyft, or Uber? Probably, Patrick, that's a question for you.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that's a good question. I think at least in a few sessions that I attended before seeing this one, there's a few different areas where the theme kept coming up, especially in Germany, where there's a lot of large corporations, and how can those sort of corporations that tend to move a bit slower tap into the fast track of the startup world. And I think there, what you've seen is the large car manufacturers saying, okay, well, we want to get with the times, we want to be involved in the future, and it's probably easier to invest in a tech company that's already working on that than trying to create that yourself. So there's been several sort of pairings or matchings. At Uber, for example, we joined into a strategic partnership with Toyota, where people realize, okay, well, there is a tech company working on this. I'm a car manufacturer. I might want to figure out what's going to happen there. So I think that's why you've seen some of these in the past, and I wouldn't be surprised if you see some more of those going forward.
If you're talking about Toyota, are you also talking about self-driving cars in the future? I mean, for example, Lyft is cooperating with General Motors, and they're also planning self-driving taxis or an autonomy with Ford. Is there something planned with Uber as well?
Yeah, I think, look, self-driving mobility is a very interesting topic, and I think there's a lot of people, including ourselves, probably Apple, Google, all the large car manufacturers, Tesla. I mean, there's really not a big company that isn't thinking about it and isn't looking into doing some research there, and we're certainly part of that as well.
Talking about Tesla, Sebastian, is it a hype, or is it just one of the greatest pioneers in mobility? What would you say?
Well, I don't know if I'm really the expert taking my opinion on Tesla. I mean, they, of course, are in two industries where we as an airline might be in between car and mobility, of course, and then SpaceX, looking at the space travel. My personal opinion, I mean, Tesla definitely, I think, changed a lot of thinking how corporates perceive their own industry. So I realized it when even Lufthansa top managers, Lufthansa board members, when they talk to Audi, when they talk to Daimler, they just understand that disruptors today and then competitors today just completely work differently. And I think this is the core of the question when it comes to how do you want to build innovation as a corporate. The question is really, where do you get the talent from? How do we attract people that normally decide that they rather work for Tesla or Uber? And if we have those people, how do we set up an environment where those people can really create innovation and create business? So whether it's a hype or not, it definitely has an impact on multiple industries.
So we all know Uber, but could you introduce yourself and explain what Lufthansa Innovation Hub is and how does it work?
Well, the Lufthansa Innovation Hub is, well, in one sentence, we're kind of the central bridge between Lufthansa Group as a corporate and the startup ecosystem. So we decided 1.5 years ago that startups are a very relevant stakeholder for Lufthansa, and we just did not want to launch the next incubator, accelerator, corporate VC. We really wanted to figure out how that partnership, how that relation between corporates and startups can create value and can create impact. So speaking in startup terms, we are an MVP ourselves. So Lufthansa Innovation Hub is a company, and we try to figure out how to generate most of the impact which is possible of both worlds. And as of today, we have two pillars. The one is we partner with startups. That means we initiate partnerships between a startup and Lufthansa, because Lufthansa, and I think that counts for many corporates, they're great. They have brand value, they have reach, they have a lot of untouched assets, and that could really help to leverage the power of a startup. Whereas on the other side, so this partner with startups, we also have the pillar where we say we want to build startups ourselves. If we see a great opportunity in travel, we want to build the product, and if it's successful, then of course also do the spin-off. So this is.
Could you give one example?
Well, we have one we just discussed, which is airlinecheckins.com. So I think every one of us is really annoyed that you have to still check in yourself manually, that airlines forces every one of us to type in your own name and just some random numbers into the system of the airline. And we, as the Lufthansa Innovation Hub, we built a service which is called Airline Check-ins. It's airlinecheckins.com. And that service allows you to check in automatically for more than 100 airlines. So it's only a very small thing, but we really start to disrupt the own industry and also disrupt Lufthansa as a core on that specific topic. Because Lufthansa as an airline would never be interested in such a service. They like having us going onto the website, potentially being able to sell us different products, etc., etc. So with us launching a new service, attacking those, we do not create many fans within Lufthansa, but as a traveler, as we are, or as I am a traveler myself, I just use the product because it makes life easier.
Thank you for your explanation. Olaf, Capnamic Ventures is involved in UNO. UNO is building e-scooters, or Jacobi. They having products for e-bikes. Could you explain why are you invested in this kind of startups?
Yeah, yeah. Before I give some more color on the two investments we have made.
Please go ahead.
Some information about on Capnamic Ventures. So we are an early stage tech venture firm located in Berlin and Cologne, and we predominantly invest in German-speaking countries, mainly in A rounds, some seed investments, and our sweet spot is really technology investments, with the majority in the B2B area. The background, what I and my partners and I will bring to the table is an entrepreneurial background and a long track record in venture capital. I have grown and funded 3 startups, participated in 1 IPO and 1 trade sale, and 1 startup is still alive. But I left the startup, and in 2007 I changed sides of the table and became a VC. Somebody asked me to do this, and I gave it a try. So I'm doing this now for 9 years, and have done a couple of investments in the tech area. So that's my background, and the other 2 partners is Christian Ziegler and Jörg Binbrücker, and we are running Capnamic. So yeah, we have done 2 investments in the mobility sector. It really depends on from which angle or perspective you're looking onto this startups. Is it a mobility startup or is it an IoT startup? Sometimes there's a mixture.
But is UNO a IoT startup?
Well, UNO is definitely a mobility startup. And the reason why, and I would like to get one step back before we talk about business cases and startups, just only some numbers, which I pulled out of some reports we have used for the evaluation and due diligence before we have invested in UNO. Let's take the automotive market. The automotive market today, or maybe it was 2012, was a $3,500 billion US dollar market. 3,500 billions worldwide. In 2030, so it's now 14 years from now, it will be a $6,700 billion dollar market. So it more or less double. 1,500 billions will come from sharing. So not from the sale of vehicles, from sharing. And 1 billion of this entire automotive market in 2030 will come from data, connectivity, software, navigation, all that stuff. So, and now Mercedes-Benz or Volkswagen and so on and so forth, they have to ask the question, are we a car manufacturer or are we a sharing provider? And they are not a sharing provider. Maybe Mercedes is doing this with, I think, what's the name? Car2Go? Is it Car2Go? Yeah. And they have acquired MyTaxi, so they are trying to do. But anyway, the market is growing. This is the automotive market. And then you have the urban mobility market. Today, I think about, what is it, 52% of the population is living in urban environment. That means in cities like Berlin, Johannesburg, New York, you name it. Urban areas, more, I think 52%. In 2050, we're talking about 70% living in urban areas with an increasing number of population. So if you go to London today and if you try to get 1 kilometer on the street with a cab from A to B, you will go in the same speed like 150 years ago horses were going. So it really doesn't work anymore, the entire urban mobility, and that's why we are investing in cases which are trying to fix this problem. So coming to UNO, at the first view, it's an e-scooter, say, vendor. But this is just the beginning. UNO's concept is to offer an e-scooter to all of us living in an urban area with the ability to share this by you or by me, owned scooter with other people. Because honestly, I have a car, but 23.5 hours a day, the car is useless, just standing there and wasting my money and the environment. So, and the concept in the urban area is in scooter because you're much faster, the footprint is not that big. It's an e-scooter because it's say the more innovative and ecological, a better way to drive, and then the sharing concept on top of it, but without owning an own fleet.
So is it comparable then to EMIO? EMIO is the biggest scooter sharer here in Berlin with 150 scooters.
They have their own fleet, and the concept of UNO is an open concept. So not only the UNO scooter will be under the roof or open platform of this sharing, let's say, ecosystem. Other vehicles will be, let's say, connected to this concept as well.
Talking about sharing, Sebastian, there are also some flight sharing startups. Since last year, for example, Wingly or Flight Club. Why are these kind of startups interesting for your topic?
I think from an airline in general, it's just really interesting to understand who has the contact to the customer. So where are we actually booking our flights? I mean, I don't know how you guys are doing it, but the time that people really go to an airline website in order to book their ticket, I personally believe that those days are over. So the next question is where do those people book their flights? And today, of course, you have online travel agencies like Expedia, et cetera, but we see how the world changes from an app world into a bot world, and where we actually just now start with trends like conversational commerce. So we start using messengers where we actually say that we have a mobility need, and then somebody else, whether that is a person or an algorithm, will try to solve that need. So in the end, yes, there's an airline flying, but the question is really where's the contact? Where's the contact to the customer? And we observe a lot of different trends. The one is, as you mentioned, the sharing. Another one very interesting is flat rates. There's a startup in the US called OneGo, and they offer a flat rate for $1,500. You can use all airlines that fly between 5 different cities in the US as much as you want, and you only pay $1,500 per month. That's it. That's the deal. If you are a frequent traveler or a heavy traveler, that's a very convenient mode. If you are the airline, one of those 5 airlines, you're just been taken out of the loop because you are not in front line of owning the customer contact. So I think it's very interesting to understand those things because they will all trigger the way airlines will sell their tickets. They will trigger the way airlines understand their own revenue systems or revenue management systems. So currently I see it as a learning case. It's not potentially an investment case so far because I also don't know what of those startups will actually survive and where we're going to, or if we come to an Uber pool for airlines, I don't know. But it's very interesting to understand those developments right now.
Patrick, where to invest in mobility? What's your opinion?
Where's the what, sorry?
Where to invest in mobility?
Where to invest? I mean, I think and there's probably hopefully a few people who've used Uber before, and I don't know how many of you guys have been in cities where we have sort of some of our more advanced products like Uber Pool, which is when more than one person shares an Uber together. And I think what we've always seen is the incredible benefits that come with getting high utilization. And so what we mean with that is, if you guys, when you leave today, kind of look around, what you'll notice, and it's something that you probably see every day, but if you actually sort of run the numbers, and it's a little bit back to what Olaf was saying about his own car, is most cars when you walk outside that you see are standing still, right? They're parked. And then the ones that you do see moving slow in traffic, because it's going to be like 6 p.m. when we leave, probably most of them have like one person in the car, or I think the German average is 1.3 people in that car. So you have a situation where a car that for most people is, up to like a year's worth of salary, often or more. So it's like one of the biggest items that you have in your household next to your mortgage for your house, usually, is sitting there and is just costing you money 23.5 hours a day, because you still have to pay for parking, for insurance, for the wear and tear. It's also one of the few things that you invest so much money in as an individual that the second you buy it keeps going down, versus at least when you buy real estate or an apartment, hopefully long term it tends to go up. So we said, okay, well, what's, there's got to be a better way. So I think for us always the ambition is to get cities to a place where there's so many options for people to get around that you no longer have to own a car. Because I hear this all the time. My friends are like, oh yeah, but I still own a car because on weekends I want to drive around. Well, every city should have a way for you to really simply rent a car for a few hours when you want it. So we have companies in different countries that do these services, right? And you have countries and cities that now have options for you to rent a bike. And so all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, I can easily take public transport into the city, and in the evening, if I miss the last train, I don't have to worry, because then there's also, the ability to drive my own car and rent a car for an hour, or there's an ability to take a taxi, or there's an ability to take an Uber, or there's ability to rent a scooter. And so once all these options are really there, then all of a sudden the need to own a car falls away, because all those other options are still all in cheaper, because you only pay for the 30 minutes you use the scooter, or 30 minutes you use the Uber, or so on. So I think for us, the game is always higher utilization. And so when I think about where are the opportunities to invest in mobility, I think if you're seeing companies that are in creative and innovative ways taking some of that waste out of the system, then that's where you'll see big gains. Because what it means is, when you drive utilization up, is that everyone benefits. The people that are driving the cars, right? Instead of, I think in Berlin, the average taxi driver sits idle for about 70% of the time. So about 40 minutes out of 68 minutes, he just sits there. And the 20 minutes that he's charging customers have to pay for the full 60 minutes. So the reason rides are often more expensive than they should be is because we're paying for the downtime as well. So as if you cut out the downtime, then obviously the driver can still make more, but the passengers actually pay less. And then if you can put more than two or more than one person into that same car, then you bring up that utilization. So it's always a utilization game.
But are there other technologies you're interested in? For example, last week there was Uber Pitch. So there was the possibility for startups to meet with an investor in a taxi. They drove around for, I think, 40 minutes, and then they had a pitch. So are there other technologies Uber might be interested in? And
yeah, I think as we go, it's interesting, right? Because once you get to a point where you push a button and within 2 minutes a car shows up and takes you from A to B, or can take two people from A to B, like what else can those cars do, right? So can they connect people? So Uber Pitch is obviously something that we're doing in Europe right now, given sort of the season for all the startups events, and we want to connect young entrepreneurs with people that can either invest or give them advice. But we have several products in the US where we have Uber Eats, for example, where we're connecting people with food. And again, if you think about all these things, if the cost of the car goes down when you put 2 people in the car or 3 people in the car, what if you put 3 people in the car and you put like 2 sandwiches in the trunk? Then all of a sudden you're splitting the cost of that ride by 3 people and 2 people that ordered the meals, right? And then what else can you extrapolate from there? So we are testing a lot of those things and seeing where else can we bring that efficiency of a hyper efficient and highly utilized market.
Thank you. Let's talk about e-mobility. What do you think about the German governmental subventions or subsidies? Is it useful to push this scene, or is it not useful?
I don't know. I mean, I grew up in Germany. I've seen quite a lot of the world, but I always came back. And for me, it just does not feel right whenever the state really sets up new rules and goes into new markets. The same as it just not felt right the way corporates try to do innovation by just copying the way they move. So I think as a society, we have to find, I mean, this is a broader perspective than the question you asked, but as a society, we have to find new modes of how we deal with topics, how do we find answers, and how we implement them. So I can't say whether it's right or not, whether it's right to just take money and provide that to people who want to buy an electric car. Of course, it's market stimulation, but you could also do different things. You could take a hardcore mobility perspective as the state and say that mobility is a state service, and you would think completely differently because you would think about customer needs and you would provide solutions instead of providing rules. So it's a different way to tackle that. So I think that, yeah, going back to that point, we have to do something in order to change the world we see it today, but I just don't know if setting up rules and handing out money is the right solution. It's probably not bad, but it does not feel right.
Olaf, what do you think? Isn't it unfair that there are subventions for cars but not for scooters, like you know?
What in life is fair? So it's more a political discussion. Well, it's not the government, it's us. And if we as a community of 83 million people think that we have to push one technology or we have to get rid of one technology, if we talk about nuclear power plants, then, well, someone has to do it. I don't know if it's right or wrong. The automotive industry, honestly, would never be an industry I would invest in because it's a slow-moving industry. I've seen in my own portfolio or with my ex-portfolio 2 companies struggling because they were trying to sell products for the automotive industry. And if you see the German, let's say, sales cycle of a new car, well, you're talking about 12 years. So new car comes out, lifetime 6 or 7 years, but the successor is already designed when the pre-successor comes out. So that's why this industry it's important for us, but it's a very slow-moving industry, and I think Tesla is a very good example. I don't know if Tesla will win the race, or if you know, Mercedes and BMW and Volkswagen, if they really push hard, if they can speed up. I don't know. I'm not an expert, but as I've said, the industry is slow, and sometimes. Well, there's a saying: you can show a horse water, but you can't make it drink, and sometimes you have to push a little bit. Yeah.
What would be an interesting startup for coming investments for Capnamic Ventures?
This is a very general question. So I'm interested to talk to every founder and to every team. And as I've said, well, if somebody will approach me and said, well, I'm going to build a new car, I said, okay, good luck. I think it's, in Germany we would say, ein dickes Brett bohren, a heavy lift. But I come from marketing. My first career, I was senior vice president in an international corporation, and what I've learned is whenever a consumer is dealing with compromises, like the check-in, to put in these numbers, and if you can get rid of these compromises for the consumer will pay for it, will use it. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So, and if there's a startup, for example, booking flights. Maybe some of you know this startup, eWings. It's a Berlin-based startup. I saw the pitch, and I'm a frequent traveler. I saw immediately said, "Wow, this is really solving a problem here." Yeah, because Opodo and Kayak and all these, let's say, meta searches they are not solving the problem. So and I think even in mobility, cases like Uber, and they started small, yeah? Or in vacation accommodation, Airbnb, they started small. They had the right timing when the economy was down in the United States and people wanted to get extra money, and they rented out their flats. So timing is right, and it's very important, and you have to solve a compromise or a problem for the end customer, or even for a B2B customer.
Thank you for your comment. Does anybody has a question in the audience?
Yes, hi, thank you. So I think we saw that big part of your discussion was about the sharing economy, and I totally agree with you that utility on demand becomes more and more important than actual ownership. But you can probably speak from experience as being part of Uber, and you probably also as an investor of what the major challenges for startup in that industry are. Is it maybe insurance, legal things? Is it IT? And maybe what advice you could give startups in that area?
I don't know. Olaf, do you want to go first? If not, I'm happy to.
Yeah. Well, I take a step back and take this as a general question. The more moving parts and moving targets you have in your startup, the more complicated it gets with the magnitude. So let's take Uber. I'm not a Uber expert. I'm using Uber, and I really love it, especially in London and New York. So at first you have to get the driver. If there are no customers, you have an empty disco effect. The driver is not happy. So two moving parts and targets. Then you have to the jurisdiction, and the government will say, well, this is not insured, or there's in Germany, what is it? A union or an association of cab drivers fighting against you because you're disrupting their market, because they are slow and it needs to be disrupted. So you have to fight in a regulated market. For an investor, a regulated market like health or energy, it's a red flag, because we don't know what the government will do or what associations will do if they cut off the bloodstream for the startup. So tough to say what we would do. It really depends on the particular case.
Yeah, so I think everything Olaf said effectively goes back to, are you going to be able to scale? Because I think the biggest thing that you see with all these markets is the ability to extract the efficiencies only comes at like high frequency and high scale. So in markets where there are things that are going to prevent scale, it's going to be really tough to get to that equilibrium point where, okay, we need, obviously the system runs a lot more effective if you're doing, 1 million trips a day, for example, for Uber, than if you're doing like 1,000 trips a day, right? Because then all of a sudden, like all these little things are connected, right? So all of a sudden now, because there's cars everywhere and users everywhere and riders everywhere, you, on average, you don't have to wait like 5 to 7 minutes anymore for a car. You only have to wait 1 minute for a car, right? That also then means that the driver isn't sitting empty sort of or driving 4 minutes for which he doesn't get paid, because he doesn't get paid when he drives to you. So all of a sudden, he only has a 1 minute driving or estimated time of arrival. So all of a sudden, he's only got 1 minute of waste in his system where he's not spending, which means after he drops you off, he's going to do another trip. So all of a sudden, you go from a driver doing 1 trip per hour to doing 2 trips to doing 3 trips per hour. And so all of a sudden, that then means that, okay, well, now he's doing 3 trips an hour, which means the cost of the trips can go down, which entices riders to use Uber more, which means there's even more trips. So sometimes what we've seen is actually like in cities where we reduce prices, we end up seeing the drivers making more money because so many more people start using it. So it's always about just continuing that growth and that scale, because that's ultimately going to be that flywheel that just keeps spinning faster and faster and faster as you get the scale going. So I'd say always push on, and also think to yourself, like, calculate at what scale is this going to make sense? Is the product I am making going to start making a profit once I start shipping like 1,000 units, or or is it 10,000, or is it 100,000, or is it 1 million? Or would it be really bad if I only sell one of these? Or is it something that's so cool and unique that every one makes a profit? So I think the scalability is what we always come back to at least in the sharing economy.
More questions? Please, the microphone. Thank you.
What do you envision is the biggest technology impact on the market? We talked a lot about sharing, but do you see the impact from batteries or charging, or the algorithm solving the traveling salesman problem in cities? What do you think technology is doing for the market?
I think I take this question because about technology, and we are thinking about this. Yeah? When we have evaluated the market and the case of for UNU, whether to decide to invest or not, some really interesting KPIs came up, and I have a very bad memory. That's why I took the KPIs with me. So the urban mobility in 2010, and the KPI is PKM, it's people kilometer, was 25 trillion in 2010. In 2030, we will have 43 trillion people kilometer per annum, also annually. And in 2050, 67, so double. That means how many people are driving, not walking, in a city from A to B, and all these kilometers added. This won't work anymore, whether it's a diesel engine or an electric engine from Tesla. So there's the vehicle, and it has a footprint, and it has to go from A to B, it has to park. So that means we have to reduce the number of vehicles, and Uber is one case to reduce it. Because the demand of people kilometer annually in a city can't be, let's say, satisfied. It will be a mega traffic jam, 365 days a year. So we have to reduce, or the industry has to reduce the vehicles, or has to shift from cars to scooter, or from cars to trains, whatever. And there's some very interesting study from McKinsey about this, the future of urban mobility, and all the KPIs are from the study.
Sebastian, do you have something to add?
Well, if it comes to technology, I really believe that algorithms are going to be the main driver. As I said, I really love Uber Pool, and when a lot of people had different options a couple of years ago when it was about sharing a cab to go somewhere, and I always said, well, I just do not see myself leaving an aircraft, for example, looking around for other people, make signs, and then decide to share a cab. I said, as soon as an algorithm tells me, well, there's one person who also wants to jump in that car, and as soon as it's as convenient as I only have it with Uber Pool, seeing my numbers, okay, that's additional 2 minutes drive, but it saves you $8. Okay, yes, of course, then I'm going to use that Uber Pool. So I believe the next step in that development of the sharing economy really is due to the algorithm.
One statement to this. In Berlin, Tegel, you can see this. Sometimes there are no cabs. And if the pain point is getting too heavy, people are starting to build these algorithms. They are talking to each other and say, do you want to go to Mitte? Yeah, me too. Okay, let's go together.
Yeah. Sure. So, and there's one development which I think it really shows how wrong things are in travel. The amount of Reisebüros, travel services, travel hotels in Germany increased in 2015 again. So when it comes to travel, people again rely on personal interaction because travel is now so complex. And I believe that this will only count for like 2 or 3 years that we go back to a one-on-one discussion, because no one of us likes to compare 10 different websites in order to choose their travel. But as soon as an algorithm is able to do that, to have that capability to really understand my needs, provide the service, understand the context, and make it as convenient that I just order with the press of a button, I really believe that that is the biggest enabler. And I think I'm working in the travel area, and there was one announcement by Facebook that that really woke us up. And Facebook said that the first industry vertical they're going to target was their Facebook M, which is all their power they have in artificial intelligence put in the Facebook Messenger. They said they're going to enter the travel vertical because it's a 7 billion market. And when Facebook says that they use all their power they have when it comes to artificial intelligence in order to make all our lives easier with regard to travel, I think this is a great statement being a traveler, but it should also wake you up being a company working in the travel area.
Thank you very much for having you, and enjoy the HEUREKA, and thank you to you guys.
Thank you.